Hey, welcome to Pride Raise. This week we are in the book of Acts because we're taking a break from Proverbs because here it's Resurrection Week. And we're talking about Easter and all that kind of stuff, which is usually what we talk about anyway. But in the church calendar, it's Resurrection Sunday. And so we're going to be looking at Acts 26, verse 8. And I called this, Why Is It Incredible? Because that's what Paul asks in this section. And so you'll see why we're talking about this, because it's talking about the resurrection. Now, Wednesday nights at our church, I've been teaching kids, teaching children, and we've been going through the story of the Apostle Paul. Actually, we just finished it. Now, toward the end of his story in Acts, we find out how the apostle makes his way to Rome, which was a prophecy that was given to him. All true prophecies of God come with this identifier, specificity. You see that throughout the Bible. He would preach in Rome. That was the prophecy. Very specific. He would do this. Not somebody out there will preach. I hear somebody will do this. No, it's, Paul, you will make it to Rome. You will preach in Rome. That was the prophecy. Now, how he would get there was not included in the prophecy, but he would get there eventually. And so we read our way through the end of the book of Acts. We find out that this actually does come true. Paul, through this preaching, enrages the Jews, and they seek to kill him. Though the Jews continually plot against him and try to manipulate the government officials into creating a situation where they might kill Paul, they are thwarted every time. Paul would be brought before Governor Felix. Felix was inept and corrupt politician and left Paul in custody and never sought to resolve the situation. He just had Paul sitting there for years. He'd bring him out and say, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And okay, whatever. But never did anything to advance the cause of Paul. Now he hadn't, he was there. And so eventually Felix is replaced by Festus because he was such a horrible governor. And he didn't waste time in trying to figure out Paul's situation. After meeting with Paul, he was ready to send him to Jerusalem to be tried by the Jews. But Paul, knowing what awaited him at the hand of the Jews, decided to appeal to Caesar. This meant that Paul had to be sent to Rome so that he could plead his case before the emperor. Now Festus had no choice but to send Paul. Yet he had really no reason in mind to send him. Why am I going to send this guy to the emperor if what did he do? So he didn't think it was fitting to send a prisoner to Rome without a letter to Caesar stating why he was appearing before him. Caesar's a busy man. He wants to be a good governor. He's just replaced a guy who's inept. So he knows he could be replaced too. And so he doesn't want to send this guy to Rome without sending a letter along with him. Now Festus decides to consult King Agrippa. Agrippa was the king of the Jews at the time, which is really a puppet king put in place to appease the Jewish population. Now Agrippa hears about Paul and is curious. He wants to know what's going on. Who is this guy? And he asks to meet with Paul himself. And he wants to hear firsthand what's going on. Now Paul is brought before Agrippa, and Festus is there, and he brings other Jewish leaders in to speak, so that he could speak to them. Paul begins by stating that he is a Pharisee. Now the controversy that he is caught up in is one that had split the Jews into two main camps, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. One of their main disagreements was whether or not the Old Testament taught the resurrection of the dead. Paul, being a Pharisee, believed that the Bible promised the resurrection of the dead. He believed in the afterlife, he believed in spirits and the soul, and he believed that people would rise from the dead. Now Paul states, "Why is it thought incredible by any of you that God raises the dead?" Now Paul then gives his testimony to the group. He shares how he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he claims that he was in trouble because he was obeying the heavenly vision of the resurrected Christ. He's saying the reason why I'm on trial is because I had this vision of Jesus. I hadn't killed Jesus, but Jesus came back and he was talking to me. And I've seen him. I've seen the resurrected Christ. He's alive. And he says, the trouble I'm in right now is because Jesus is alive. And I was just listening to what he said. Jesus came back to life. And he told me what to do. And that's why I'm in trouble. So Paul Upon hearing Paul's story, Festus accuses Paul of being out of his mind. He said, "Your education, your learning has made you crazy." But Paul disagrees and says that he is using true and rational words. He's not speaking some kind of fantasy myth. He's like, "No, this is exactly what I just told you what happened. These are the events as they happened." Agrippa, being a Jew, knew the controversy between the people. He already knew that. And he knew the prophecies concerning the Messiah. In his question to those gathered, Paul states the problem that is truly at the heart of all the controversy between the Jewish people. And he really addresses the problem that the pagans all had too. Why is it thought incredible by any of you that God raises from the dead? Right? Why do you think it's credible that God raises the dead? Answer this question and answer it correctly, and all the issues of everyone present would have been solved. If they get it wrong, then their eternity is at stake. See, it's very fitting to talk about this question. Why do any of you think it's incredible that God raises the dead? It's a very fitting question for Resurrection Sunday. It was on that Sunday that the firstborn from the dead, the resurrection occurred, right? And with the first came a promise that all would rise one day. So the question that Paul asked centuries ago is still valid today. It's a question we must ask ourselves. Why is it thought incredible by any of us that God raises the dead? So I have two main points for you this week, and we'll see that in the next two lessons, followed by a conclusion, as we normally do. So first, I will discuss the problem that the question and the surrounding ideas contain. And then second, I will attempt to show you the correct answer. So, come back next time, and we will begin our study.